We're just going to proceed right now with the guest that we have on the show. For most of you who've been following the series so far, Gibbs Dube has been the reporter, and he's here in the studio with us. And we have to say thank you so much, Gibbs, for joining us, and thank you for sharing this very interesting information about circumcision. Tell us how you got to do this series and why.
Now, Ndimyake, thank you very much for coming to your show, and I appreciate really that you're actually running the series here. So this is part of what is called an African Story Challenge, sponsored by the African Media Initiative. It is sort of like a group of people that came together to set up an entity to promote good journalism skills. So now I got a grant to actually research my story together with 20 other journalists who actually contested to get places to do their stories.
Well,
there are so many of those stories that have been done.
Well, let's focus on yours. What came out of your research? Obviously, we saw some part of it, but any myths dispelled from your standpoint?
There were several themes that were actually emerging from what I observed on the ground. The first thing is women are actually blocking some men from being circumcised. And the reason is they think maybe the men will run away. And the second thing is on impotence. Some people fear that maybe if their organ is touched, somehow they will lose that kind of libido, which is, important in a marriage.
Right.
And then there's general fear in Ndimyake. Fear that maybe somebody will cut the, organ in a wrong way. So that's a very serious fear. And at the same time, there are fears about witchcraft.
Right.
People say, okay, what happens to the foreskin? Some believe maybe it's used for making spice, and others maybe they say, it's used for witchcraft purposes.
Right, to enrich people and to
businesses.
Right.
Yeah, apparently we talked to some Nangas.
Yes, we saw them. Yes.
Yeah, in the city of Bulawayo.
Right.
They were saying some businessmen, they actually come to the market where they sell these different things to look for the foreskins.
But now the
they
witchcraft,
don't give them. Yeah.
The Ngangas, rather, you said they don't indulge
they say
in that kind of practice.
Give
they burn them.
They burn them soon after circumcision, which is maybe the way to go, like in hospitals. They actually incinerate them.
Now, I think some of your packages suggested, but I'm not sure if I heard it succinctly put, that circumcision alone is maybe not as effective as it being in combination with safe-sex practices, right?
Yeah.
You still have to use condoms. You still have to use protection.
Yes, Ndimyake. So the issue here is you can be circumcised, but that does not protect you from contracting HIV. So it's a question of you protecting yourself in one way or the other. Because, circumcision reduces, HIV transmission by only 60%. So what happens to the 40%? Which means you can actually contract HIV if you are just careless. And at the end of the day, there is an issue that is of concern, perhaps, that some men are actually abandoning condoms.
Right.
And they're
because
just,
they think,
that's it.
You made reference to that too. Now, actually, the video that we did introduce earlier is going to show now, and we can see some more of Gibbs Dube's reporting on circumcision in Southern Africa.
A Zimbabwe demographic and health survey conducted by the country's statistics agency in 2010 and 2011 revealed that men between ages 15 and 49 who were circumcised were slightly more likely to be HIV positive than uncircumcised men. These results appear to be almost applicable to South Africa and Swaziland, where circumcision programs were implemented in 2009 to reduce the spread of HIV. In most cases, circumcised men are believed to be engaging in unsafe sex. Despite these findings, HIV/AIDS expert Professor GABRIEL ANABWANI says there is no need to conduct further research to prove the effectiveness of circumcision in curbing HIV transmission.
Even if a vaccine for HIV was to be found today, male circumcision would probably be the most preferred.
Professor ANABWANI also says the high HIV prevalence rate in most Southern African nations is being fueled by lack of circumcision.
In countries where every male is circumcised, the HIV prevalence has never gone above 5 or 6%. The reason why HIV prevalence is highest in Southern Africa is because it's the only part of the continent where male circumcision rates are the lowest.
Dr. Owen Mukurungi, head of Zimbabwe's AIDS and Tuberculosis Unit, is concerned that large numbers of circumcised men are engaging in promiscuous behavior. The situation is the same in Swaziland and South Africa, where HIV, AIDS and tuberculosis expert PILCA USTERO says there is general lack of education of HIV prevention under the 2009 voluntary male circumcision programs.
The problem is like it has been shown effective in studies, but sometimes the reality it's not as the studies. There are a lot of misbeliefs. The people think that the foreskin can be used for other purposes, from like witchcraft to trading. It can. Sometimes they were saying that it's even sent to the States and used for other things.
Urologist HASSAN of Zimbabwe shares the same sentiments, noting that male circumcision should be encouraged in all communities.
There is a lot of wrong information which is being publicized and going around and around, where the people we don't have any basis, because for us people going on a scientific basis, you have to do proper study. The circumcision, actually what you do is just cut the foreskin, and foreskin, it has nothing to do with the fertility.
Professor ANABWANI says such programs have been successful in Kenya's Kisumu region.
Within the Kenyan population, that is one area where traditionally the men never circumcised. And the HIV rates in that population were as high as those in Southern Africa. And the men were dying, and the men were infecting the women, and the women were dying. And the women were infecting the children, and the children were dying. And the community elders got together and said, we have to do something about this. And so the drive to have the males circumcised was not imposed by the Ministry of Health or any other organization. It came from within.
The situation remains bleak in these countries as HIV/AIDS is devastating communities where millions of AIDS orphans need care. Some of the institutions helping orphans, such as the Baylor International Patriotic AIDS Initiative, are struggling to cope with such a large number of orphans. It remains unclear whether the voluntary medical male circumcision program in these African nations is the answer to the fight against HIV/AIDS in Africa and beyond. Gibbs Dube reporting for VOA.
And again, thank you so much, Gibbs Dube, for the three-part series that you've provided for us to
Thank you.
share with our audience. And that was the last of a three-part series on circumcision in Southern Africa.